Every year, nearly 3 million people visit Yellowstone National Park.
For many Americans, Yellowstone has become the iconic landscape, wilderness landscape.
It contains the beauty of the mountains, it contains the wonders of the geysers, and one only has to look at a herd of buffalo roaming and drinking from the stream to feel absolutely in touch with what it means to be American.
They go to wilderness for an escape from modern life, into a vast, uninhabited landscape. A world of nature untainted by the hand of man. But places like Yellowstone are not as natural as they look. They're a modern invention. The American wilderness was not saved, it was created.
It began as someone's home, and to make it a wilderness, they had to be expelled. They had to lose that land, they had to be dispossessed.
The Unnatural History of Yellowstone is the story of the creation of wilderness in America. It's a tale of railroad barons and Indian wars. A battle to save one species and to destroy another. But it is also the story of a powerful and controversial idea that shaped America and underpins the way that most of us think about nature today.
If I had one term to ban from the English language, it'd be wilderness. I think it's the most disgusting, despicable, denigrating, racist term in the English language.
Today, places we describe as wilderness or wild are highly valued in our culture, but this wasn't always the case, even in America.
When the earliest English colonists arrive on the eastern seaboard of North America, they bring certain religious assumptions with them that lead them to think of the wild as a satanic, dangerous place, a place where you lose your soul, a place populated by demons. There's very little affection for that landscape, very little sense of being drawn to the wilderness as an attractive place. It's a scary place.
Landscapes we call wilderness were, to these deeply religious people, the waste. As men and women struggling to make a living from the land, it was the pastoral, cultivated landscape they found beautiful and godly.
They see that their role in this is literally as an agent of God. He created the rough draft and he put them on earth to finish it. And so finishing becomes their metaphor. That was, they move in, they're going to finish the whole continent, make it as if a garden, and the wilderness will disappear.
This old negative perception of wilderness and of wild, uncultivated lands began to change, not in America, but in Europe. Over the course of the 18th century, wild places once avoided because they were seen as ugly and satanic became sought out by poets, philosophers, and artists looking for a very special, powerful experience, the sublime.
If you want to understand why we now think about wilderness the way we do, you first have to come to grips with a word I think we kind of take for granted today, which is the word sublime. In the 18th century, that word came to mean places in nature where God was most immanent in the world. You would go to experience the sublime in those places, to stand face to face with your God.
What sublime represented is sort of the extreme sport of the 18th century in Europe. It was to stare at a waterfall, or to stare into a chasm, or to look up at a magnificent mountain. What the viewer is doing is sort of experiencing sheer terror and reveling in the experience, sort of ravishing in being able to encounter the awful power of God.
The sublime became a key feature of Romanticism.
Artists such as Turner and poets such as Byron were exploring these depths of feeling and emotion through the concept of the sublime. And Turner would go to the Alps and paint the Alps. Turner would supposedly tie himself to a ship's mast and experience a sea storm.
One of the things you'll see in the European sublime is it has to be a landscape which appears to be devoid of humans. The Alps become the favorite sublime landscape. As you go up high enough above the villages, there finally you're confronting a world without humans. The Arctic, the ocean, all of the places where in fact you confront a nature unmodified and unrestrained by human beings.
This aspect of the sublime would slowly transform elite American visions of wilderness when Romanticism crossed the Atlantic at the beginning of the 19th century. Just as the United States was emerging as a new, independent nation.
One of the greatest achievements of Romanticism in the 19th century was to invent the modern nation as we know it. A nation that looked not to the divine rights of kings, not to the crown for its authority, but looked instead to the people and the land that had made those people who they were. So in America, the myth of wilderness is also one of the founding myths of American nationalism. The wilderness is the place out of which America came. It was where the pioneers went, and the struggle to make a nation out of the wilderness, the frontier, is central to America as a nation, as a people.
The first American notions of a sublime or romantic sublime are located in what is called the Hudson River Valley in upstate New York, where painters could go out into nature and experience the full majesty, the spectacular nature of American landscape.
But as the United States expanded westward, the focus shifted.
By the decades following the Civil War, the great center of the romantic sublime for Americans is the far west. It's places like Yellowstone.
Before long, this romantic idea of wilderness, as uninhabited places with sublime scenery, would collide with the real landscapes and inhabitants of the West. People for whom the very idea of wilderness was meaningless.
Only to the white man was nature a wilderness. To us, it was tame. Earth was bountiful, and we were surrounded with the blessings of the great mystery. Not until the hairy man from the east came, and with brutal frenzy heaped injustices upon us,